So thank you all for coming out. This is an exciting opportunity for us to address Brevator Street, which is something that people have been talking about since before I became mayor, and certainly something that Ginny Farrell, your common council member, has been very much advocating for with respect to something that's really important in this ward. And so we've been successful, thanks in part to Pat Fahey and to New York State, in getting the funding that is going to allow us to address many of the issues that all of you are well aware of with respect to this street. And one of the things that's really important to Pat and to myself is that as we reimagine Brevator, we try to urge a reimagining of the Harriman campus altogether. And it's very rare that Chris Churchill agrees with me, but the idea that he talked about in his column today, if you saw it, is one that Pat Fahey and I have been talking about for years. And so being able to potentially use this as a springboard for reimagining the Harriman campus, imagining what it would be like if we could actually integrate it with the city, imagining what it could be like if it was residential, commercial, retail, and a number of mixed uses that would allow us to get the benefit of the hundreds and hundreds of employees that come there to work. So that's a story for another day, but I do think that it is important as we think about this opportunity to really think about what seeds this plants for the future of our city and the future of our ability to capture some value. As you all know, 64 to 67% of our property is not taxable, and so anything that we can do to try to get some property back on the tax rolls and really reimagine what the opportunities are. Clearly this Brevator Street was built and Harriman campus was built and the Empire State Plaza was built at a very different time, and an era of cars that was very car-centric, that was all about moving people into the city and then moving them as quickly as we can out of the city. And those of us who live here love our city, and we want people to come here and we want them to stay here, and we want to have the opportunity for us to have roads that are here for us. So that's what this project is about, because Brevator Street wasn't really built for you. We all know that, and so this is about reclaiming it, and we're really grateful for our consultants and for the leadership of DGS and our engineers to get us kicked off in what that reimagining could look like. And I also, again, want to thank Ginny Farrell for her advocacy and for all of her hard work to ensure that your voices have been lifted up so that we are where we are today. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
So again, welcome. My name is Frank Zioli. I'm the Deputy Commissioner of the Department of General Services. To my left is Bill Equate from our engineering office. And over here we've got Doug Gerber from Weston and Sampson, who's put together a great project here and is going to do a presentation, and we'll talk. After this is over, we'll do a Q&A, answer any questions that you might have. Go ahead.
Thank you, Frank. And thank you, Mayor. Again, my name is Doug Gerber. I work at Weston and Sampson, and we've been brought on to this project with a group of consultants to look at Brevator Street. I think we've talked about it quite enough at this point. And I want to thank you all for being here today. This is a great turnout. We're looking for input. And what you're about to see is just kind of our preliminary analysis of what we think the streetscape's about. And then we're going to go into a couple options, and we actually kind of showed them a little soon, but it gave everybody an opportunity to take a look at some ideas. But one of the things that I want everyone to understand is nothing's really set in stone at this point. What this is, and what you've seen, is an exercise to elicit conversation and get a dialogue going with the community so that we can create something that will feel representative of your neighborhood. Alongside that, you're going to see that we're going to talk a little bit about the existing conditions, which I think are really well. And one of the benefits of this is I think everybody knows that our site's right outside. So with that, I'm going to walk through a little bit of the context, a couple of these two options, and then let's all think about it that maybe the final option is maybe blending these two. So with that, this is our opening slide, as you can see, and this is the streetscape that we're aware of, and we know it's out there. We've loosely termed it as a runway. It is a wide section of concrete. And I'm going to get into these next pieces, and there's a long list of kind of goals and objectives, but they seem like there's a lot of detail here, but it's actually very high-level stuff. It's very important stuff, and it's important stuff for the community. A few years ago, there was some outreach, I believe, that was done, and some projects that were looked at the same street. A lot of what came out of that project, we're trying to overlay into this one. And the goal is to, I don't know, improve upon that idea, because we're looking at actually removing all the concrete and then putting something in its place that's more like a typical streetscape that you can see it on. So with that, we know that it's a wide, weathered section of concrete. Talk about that. It's overbuilt for a roadway. It lacks any multimodal accommodations. It's a street corridor that doesn't have that pedestrian scale to it. It's prone to flooding. The traffic dominates that right-of-way's character. I'll keep hammering on that point. I think we all know it. Maybe we can provide some better access into Rosemont Park. We could maybe do some improvements in front of the Brevator Firehouse. We would make it a little bit more pedestrian friendly across the front of that too. I think a big thing that I see when I'm out there, if I was a resident, is that if I'm standing at my house and I'm looking off over Route 85 and I'm seeing the Harriman campus, maybe there's something that can be done to create a little bit of a visual buffer between those two things, so that you feel like more like the neighborhood, say, behind you than the expressway in front of you. There's not kind of like some meaningful canopy of trees and things that kind of maybe create more of a tunnel feel as you drive through, which will calm traffic, slow things down. I was there today, and most of the cars are actually moving pretty slowly on Brevator Street, but there are people that are going to be in a rush. I was on my way to a meeting today, but I went slow. But we kind of think about those things, and it's like, it feels like the throughway, so we may treat it like one. It's also illuminated by these long, big, tall poles. It's just kind of feels overbuilt. So I'm going to go back to that first word, overbuilt. So the goals of this project, let's eliminate the concrete surface and put back things that you would normally see in a streetscape, making it easier to maintain in the long run. Reduce the roadway width, make it multimodal, make room for bicycles, make room for transit, make room for pedestrians, and give them the scale and the character that feels like walking on a traditional street. More pedestrian scale signage, we talked about the bikes, implementing green infrastructure, which is hugely important. Part of one of the things that we do about sustainability and trying to treat our environment as a better place is, and I use this example, but it's so dated, but I think at one point in time we all had a Brita filter in our refrigerator. Remember that thing? You'd open the fridge, you put water in the top, and it would go through the cold, and then at the bottom the water tasted really fresh. But we can do the same thing with the earth. And we got lots of that. So what we can take is capture water. We have a street that's prone to flooding. Detain that water, slow it down, run it through first Brita filter. We can start treating the water before it ends up on somebody else's property, or kind of in the combined sewer system, or whatever it might be in that scenario. But we can start cleaning the water before it leaves our site. So if we can implement those practices, that's terrific. And also by just removing the amount of pavement out there, that's less water we have to treat and care for and clean. We also talked about, kind of looking at a way to get into more pedestrian friendly in front of the Brevator Street Firehouse, and just maybe find some streetscape amenities and find some ways to create a visual buffer or a filter between the residences, Route 85, Harriman campus, although it might be kind of nice view, depending upon how you see it. So, lighting and street trees. So we're all familiar with the street, so what we have here is Washington Avenue to the right, and Western Avenue. And right now, you are, I believe, right here. So if we were to walk out the street, we would be on Brevator. We're familiar with the Pyramid Campus, Route 85, the access road to the campus, Brevator Street itself, Rosemont Park over here, and we have the firehouse. So I think we're all familiar with the site, and generally speaking, we've got this dashed line, which is suggesting what the project boundary is. So keep in mind that we're looking at improving this corridor. So we're going to go into a little bit more details. Pretty typical. I mean, if you go out there, it's a runway, right? So we go off into the airport maybe, and we can all kind of visualize that the runway is kind of continuous. So I'm not trying to disregard people's individual residences and some of the character that you have, but what we're trying to demonstrate here is that on one side you have the campus access road, which we talked about. We have a lawn area. Then we've got two opposing lanes, right? Two directions, some parking, and then the residences. And along in those components, you've got these tall overhead poles, we've got some utilities we have to be mindful of, utility poles. And within this, we have this right-of-way boundary, right? You see these two dashed lines, that's kind of our corridor. That's the area that we can work within. So below, we're kind of looking at the same thing, campus access road, perimeter, and residences. And we know the condition that's out there. I don't think I have to go into the existing conditions much more. But so I'm going to step in and start talking about the designs themselves. So the two options you see are really kind of based on two big ideas. And they're actually very simple, but they're very appropriate. And one of them is, how do we treat the pedestrian? So maybe it's a little bit on the pedestrian. That's maybe not the right way to put it. One of them is driven by a multi-use trail. And then that type of circulation that might allow for bicycles and things like that, and a little bit more movement, and its own dedicated pathway. That'd be a little different than you can see on a maybe more traditional street. Second option introduces a median down the center. And what that median allows us to do is create maybe an opportunity to put some stormwater management in it. So but those are the two main ideas. One's about circulation, and one's a little bit more about putting a median in. But all things will generally be treated equal in those two designs. So the multi-use trail. What you can see here is we have this general corridor. We've accommodated some of the recent improvements that have done for CDTA. We have the firehouse, but we're really talking about the same corridor throughout. And the idea is what if we put a setup where we keep the same orientation as before, the campus access road. We got a little green space here. We're kind of going back and forth. We'll walk a little bit about the sidewalk here, so it's a potential idea. But whether or not we start to introduce some lower scale lighting, we start having a two-way street like you would normally see. We give an opportunity to provide some parking, a little bit of green space in a median with some trees, and this is a multi-use path. So think of the sidewalk smushed together, right? Taking it from one side and the other side of the road and putting it on one side and putting it on the residential side to help improve those connections of the residents and the people filtering down from the neighborhood behind into this multi-use trail, giving circulation over to Washington and Western. With that, we can start breaking up the pieces. So we kind of talk about just a regular two-way road, we still accommodate the parking and the multi-use trail. Now that multi-use trail could be probably anywhere between 8, 10, and 12 feet wide. It would have a stripe down the middle, and it would allow traffic to move in two directions. So one thing that could be on the multi-use trail is bicycles and pedestrians. And they're all kind of aware of each other in this corridor or mini street for those uses. So in plan view, we're just going to go through this real quick. I think you're getting the idea that we have the right of way. We may or may not have a sidewalk to this northern edge. We have the 2 lanes of parking, and then we have this multi-use bike system within the right of way and not on people's properties. And then create those connections up and into the individual houses. What I like about this concept, if I'm allowed to like it's actually more for you than it is for me, is that it begins to provide corridor and a breakdown of spaces for these residences as they look through the trees, and it begins to filter the idea of Route 85, and we're kind of pulling pedestrians away from that. And that's kind of in a nutshell. That's option one. That's the multi-use trail. Our second option, and what kind of makes this drawing important, is that they're kind of fun to make. And the second thing is that we're going to notice that the project limit is generally the same. It is the same as option one. We're really talking about maybe some improvements at the intersections, the street, and the connectivity of Belvedere, Hawkins, and Melrose. So with those connections, it's generally the same, but now we're talking about having a center median. And I think Hackett Road's the example that we talked about a little bit. And with that, walking through, same orientation as before, we have the campus access road, some lawn space, and as you can see here, we're starting to have a bike lane, a travel lane for vehicles, a central median where we can introduce maybe some visual stormwater management practices. Bike lane, again, car travel lane, bike lane, a buffer, parking, and a sidewalk. All offering the same trees, all offering the same filter and the views to the north. And again, in plan view, it's very much the same thing that we're describing above. Bike lanes, our central median, and then sidewalks. And alongside that, I'm just going to show you some precedent images to give you an idea of what we're thinking. Taking the original street, or the street that's out there today, and beginning to convert it with a couple of things. There's a lot of different ways we can do stormwater management. We can actually do it in ways that you don't see it. So I'm not discarding it in the multi-use trail just because it's not part of the drawing as much as, so this is in water relief, this is a stormwater management basin. Basically what happens is it captures water, lets it soak through. It's really kind of like the brim, right? Where at the top sits, soaks in, begins to clean, then gets carried away. This next option, or I'm sorry, this next image is what this is demonstrating is just how an intersection might feel with a central median in it. But really what we want to talk about is how we improve the accessibility, whether it's 88 crossings, crosswalks, ideas of slowing the traffic down. And what I also like about this image is it begins to demonstrate what the street trees can feel like. That sense of enclosure, that thing that will begin to slow the traffic down. Below that, what we have is an interaction here of a multi-use trail with the street, alongside the street. Now this may not have the street trees in it, and that's something that we will talk about in the introduction in our plans, but this begins to show how those things can function. And this is right in Albany. Actually, both these images are in Albany, and actually these two are also. And so this is where a parking ride is integrated in with a bike lane and a multi-use trail. And here, this image is really just to demonstrate the idea of a central median. I think what's going to happen, we're going to be blending things together. We're going to go back to that main point. These two options will probably converge in some ways, just because of the nature of getting it all to work, getting the circulation to be safe and effective. Alongside that is, sometimes you may see median that's more traditional, where you just see a lawn, maybe there's some trees coming out. And other times you may have a little depression, where we're capturing that water, acting like a brick. And finally, this last image is more about the interaction of multi-use trails and the intersection. But these are kind of imagining that Brevator Street starts to head in this direction. And along with that, that's the end of my presentation. So, I don't know, Frank, would you like to open up to questions? Or?
Yeah, I think that might be the way to go. I will speak very clear, because there's two things. He's going to need to answer the question, so he needs to hear it, but also we're videotaping this to put on the website later, so I want it to be able to be heard. So we'll start.
Does either option offer turn lanes?
Yes.
Okay, that was easy. Go ahead. More, yeah.
So first of all, thank you. That was so helpful as a presentation. And this is more of a comment. I just want to express my appreciation that you guys are so focused on sustainable water management. and greening the place up, and that just, I think that's so wonderful. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I had a question about the flooding, because I haven't seen a lot of standing water on Brevator, but is it because it goes down to the side streets and floods some of the side streets? Where is the flooding?
Well, it's on the upper part of the watershed, so as it goes down, because we have such a wide expanse of concrete, which absorbs nothing,
Right.
it gets into the sewer system at the upper reaches of the watershed
Gotcha.
and heads down, and that's where it creates the problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's perhaps too early for this question because certainly the rules have been made for multi-use trails. But in experience with other situations, how do or do communities restrict those trails to just person-powered light bikes or how they handle e-bikes and scooters and the like?
So, I don't know if that's an enforcement question. So he's asking for the like e-bikes and things are allowed.
More of an enforcement thing with, our traffic engineering division would probably have to weigh in on that.
You go Matt.
Well, if it was prohibited,
I'm sorry?
if e-bikes were prohibited, it'd be an enforcement thing.
But,
But generally, in communities that have those trails are those electric bikes prohibited.
Yeah, well,
Driving on the streets,
no, with my experience, I don't believe so. I think it's frowned upon. I think people are expected to use it on discretion. But, I don't know.
It's something we have to think of. It's something that actually it's a police issue, unfortunately. So it's an APD thing.
well, it's a
Obviously,
PD
they're not
thing if there's a regulation or ordinance.
Right, and that's beyond the scope of this.
yeah, they would have to even set that up. I want to kind of switch around a little bit too, so I'm not all on one side. So, and I apologize for pointing, but it's the only way.
You can point.
It's the only way I can do it.
I understand the slowing down and all that. We live over on Eileen, and we just get the constant hum of traffic from 85 and of course from 87. Do you foresee this as being a bit of a sound barrier in addition to visual?
Yes, trees will offer a very small amount of calming, right? It's not going to filter out all the sounds. It's actually very hard to do it. You need a very thick forest even for it to begin. But is the humming more, you think, coming from 85 or is it kind of coming from Brevator?
I don't know.
Yeah,
It's I've gotten so used to it. I have no idea. It's there.
Trees certainly won't hurt.
I think that the trees will help, but I also think that by slowing the traffic down, will also help kind of reduce the sound.
The concrete being gone will help.
Yes.
Before Frank continues on, and please, I'm going to, just so we can have like a sign-in sheet thing, so we're able to get back in touch with people, I'm just going to circulate, this is my handy-dandy notebook, and I'm Ginny, if you don't know me, and if you don't mind putting your name and your email and just kind of a general idea of where you live, because we definitely want to make sure we're getting, especially Brevator specific people. So when you see this, please do that.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to clarify the turning lane question. It looked like on option 1, the turning lane was the center turn lane the entire width of the road. Is that correct?
No, it wouldn't be. There would be, what we'll have to do is we're going to look at the intersections individually as we get into the design. So one of the pieces of what we were working through at this point to get the bigger ideas out is we didn't really work out each individual intersection. We're also working with city traffic engineer, Weston Sampson has traffic engineers, and we're going to look at those individual spaces. So what you may see at an intersection is maybe the road gets a little wider to accommodate a left turn lane if we think it's warranted.
Okay, so then option 1, you had 3 vehicles going across on the cross section. Is there a third lane? If it's not a turn lane, what is it?
Option one?
Yeah,
Yeah, we have, oh, the third
in the
lane,
cross
it's the
section.
parking lane along the edge of the
No, in the cross section. Maybe I'm seeing it wrong. Is that three vehicles and 3 lanes there?
This is a parking lane.
That's a parking lane.
There's an existing parking lane there now,
All right.
and we learned that you never take people's parking lane.
Yeah. That's a
Not if you want to live.
All right.
They will fall.
So is the option with the center median, does that place the northbound lane closer to the residences?
No, actually, we're really kind of bound by some of the utility poles that are going down the street here. So in that option, well, they don't line up exactly perfect. But generally speaking, the right of way is here. We have the sidewalk, the parking, and not significant. I mean, maybe a foot or two, but not. Because we're not going to be able to move the utility poles. Well, not that we can, but I don't believe it's cost effective. So those are kind of a line in the sand that we really can't cross without complexity.
So I'm confused. Where would that multi-use trail go in that picture right there?
So the multi-use trail is then,
There's nothing in option 1. It's option 2 is multi-use trail.
so option 1 has a multi-use trail.
Right, so if you go back to the other option and show me how the layout would be.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yep.
You're asking if it was in.
So it looks to me that the parking and the lanes are closer to the east side of Brevator, closer to the residences. And that if, in fact, you put a trail there, that will shift everything to the left. Is that
Yes,
true?
that is true. I apologize, I misunderstood. I thought you were asking in terms of what was existing. I apologize. But that is correct. You are correct.
So that buffer that would be created by the multi-use trail, I think I heard you say 10 to 12 feet?
Yes, between 8 and 12, kind of depending on how things work out in the design. But yes, you answered the question correctly. I apologize, I misunderstood your question. Yes, the multi-use trail will push the roadway away from the residents.
Away from the residences. Thank you.
I'm just curious generally about the City of Albany's goals in terms of bike lanes and multi-use paths and who the expected users are. I see a lot of existing bike lanes added, the ones on Madison, for example, that are designed for people like me or the other folks wearing the bright neon shirts and things like that. But only a few throughout the City of Albany that are designed for basically a full family. Everyone from me teaching my kids to butt ride bikes to senior citizens in mobility chairs. We're lucky to have a few of those throughout the city, but I've seen a number of new designs coming from the City of Albany that have not focused on the entire cross-section of the population in terms of the bike lane design. Is there a set standard goal for that going forward in terms of designs?
And to piggyback on what he's saying, I'm a walker, so I have to go to the outskirts, to other places to be able to walk, and where there are also riders. So would be enough space for people to walk on these bike lanes, or are they going to be just for bikers? Because it can be dangerous with old ladies and bikers.
I think in terms of I'm Ginny Farrell. I think I know most of the people in this room, but if I don't know you, I'm Ginny. So in terms, and Avi might pop in on this, but in terms of the overall thought process behind a lot of the bike lanes, a lot of it has to do with the actual infrastructure. So I think obviously the ideal would be if we could do our own bike lanes that is separate from everything and, sidewalks, and we would love everything separate. We don't always have the infrastructure for that. And also, cost plays into it, different things like that. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this, to have neighborhood input to really, because that, you're absolutely right, it does change completely what we're going to have if we have that trail versus something that's more integrated with cars and roads. And we thinking about it in terms of we have a park here, we have a school here, there's houses on this road. So there's a lot of different things that kind of feed into Brevator. And also we have the opportunity in this space to actually think about this as a whole, what the direction we want to go to. For a lot of streets, we don't have that opportunity. The space just isn't there. So even if we had billions of dollars to spend on the street, you wouldn't have the space to be able to put the amount of space needed to do like a whole family life types together. So I think a lot of it is determined by, I wish that we could do it where we said this is our vision, but even with an overall vision, we wouldn't be able to, depending on, a lot of it's space, but also finances, obviously.
Yeah, hello everyone, Avi with the city's planning department. So just speaking to the general, like, this influences other projects, streets, elsewhere. The complete streets guideline that we have, I mean, basically breaks down different streets and areas into street typologies. So kind of identifying them, just as Jenny was saying, I'm like, the road width, the right-of-ways, the type of users and activity in that area. So it's not, this won't necessarily influence another project per se. It's, we have to look at each one in particular, identify who the users are, identify what capacity we have on those roadways. This is an interesting project though because it doesn't really kind of is in between on all of the street typologies we have. It's kind of unique compared to most others. So I think unique in a good way where we have a lot of opportunity to introduce things like a multi-use path if that's what we want. But that's not necessarily going to translate to another street per se.
And let me add this. It's all nice when we're building it. Planning does their due diligence, and we couldn't do it without the council. But at the end of the day, we got to maintain it. It's got to get plowed. It's got to get cleaned. It's got to be maintained. The street needs to be maintained. The sidewalks need to be maintained. The bike lanes. So that there is also a bit of that you have to look at. There's things that we do that you have to do because we're going to have to maintain it for the next 20 years or whatever. So that goes hand in glove with what Jenny was saying, that we have to think of all of those things. Okay, in the back with the hat.
I'm a big advocate of this project. I've been in the neighborhood 10 years now. I've always looked at it. It'd be great to have meetings and green space here. So kudos to everyone for being involved in this. So a couple quick ones. I guess just to be more succinct on another question about the multi-use lane. What I'm saying, there's no continuity of it. There's no plan to continue that anywhere else. You would just have a multi-use lane from one end of the street to the other, and that's it.
Right. Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So.
For now.
If we do something here, it could inform other projects.
Yeah, for now. But again, as Ginny said, it's thought about. Yeah, it's thought about in a lot of different plans, right? A lot of different. We take the complete streets. We look at it for now. To say that doesn't mean if it works here and we can continue it on in another project, that might be possible.
Then just other kind of part to it, but green space, everything green. The more we can do, the better. Big advocate of that. Is there any plans at this time to want to improve underground infrastructure or relocate any of the above-ground utilities? I know National Grid stopped everyone's building service. It's actually fully lit, but is Spectrum First Light anyone have they been engaged for taking things off of the poles and getting things underground?
Yeah.
So,
We don't.
all the streets ripped out.
Yeah.
Let's do it right.
Right. Exactly. I agree. We don't control that, unfortunately. So for
On the planning side.
yeah, on the plan, National Grid would have to be on board to do that if they could even do that. But
Spectrum First Light.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot more on the poles, so
Yeah.
let's get ripping everything out.
Right.
It would engage with providers.
Jeez, those are hard tough. I'm gonna just move over here quick because there's a couple people that have been. Go ahead.
Yeah, two quick questions. One, is the bike lane option there, is that a buffer on one side between the lane with the cars that are driving, or the other side? That looks like, one side looks like a buffer in the door zone, and the other one looks like a buffer between the traffic lane and the cyclist.
That's correct. There's two buffers. Yeah, one between, one here, and one here.
Okay, but the one side there's a parking, you don't have a buffer between the vehicles that are driving and the cyclists.
Oh, that's correct. There is no buffer.
All right, the other question I have, just comparing like Hackett for the multi-use path, because Hackett also has a multi-use path, but it seems like are the lots bigger there? I'm just trying to
think about the number of driveways that are going to be crossing the multi-use path here. How many driveways have you counted? How many driveways the multi-use path is crossing?
Oh, I would say there's more than Hackett. But I've only like driven Hackett and understand it visually.
Yeah.
But no, not exactly a count. But they're regular. And I mean, we're looking at it right here that we're accommodating
Right.
the driveway. So the multi-use path will be going through multiple, like all these driveways, which is also the impression that they're also calm and slow to cyclists, calm and slow, like to make the pedestrian and cyclists more aware of one another. So those components, because you're still going to be somewhat mindful of cars backing up.
Right, it's also a concern. For people, I guess people get used to it because they have to get used to the speed of a cyclist. And people who driveways, they're not often used to seeing someone, what would be a sidewalk, riding a bicycle and the speed of the bicycle. A frequent cause of cyclists getting hit by cars. That's just a concern. But how many driveways are we talking about here across the multi-use path?
Well, the roadway continues on, but I mean, I would say there's probably 15 to 20.
It's 30 congested between those two intersections.
There's 10, and then there's 5 more, so it's maybe 15.
Okay.
15 to 20.
The other thing I noticed is that if we were talking about, you weren't sure about the sidewalk on the west side of Brevator in a couple of scenarios, but you do have those apartments, at least towards the western avenue side, where those are going to need sidewalks. And
So what we're talking about doing, actually, this is a very high-level plan at this point,
Yeah.
so you get the broader, pieces arranged. But that sidewalk will continue on, and what's good about this is there's likely to be signal improvements for pedestrians. So they would be able to walk down and cross here.
okay.
So, even though there may be a multi-use trail, but I wanted to point out that, and it's a good question.
It just comes down to a matter of money.
Yeah.
Not to put sidewalks on both sides.
Right.
And if this sidewalk is even necessary, there is discussions about greater circulation here. And maybe that sidewalk is warranted, so we're still looking at that a little bit. But when we cut that section, that little piece, it was generally in here. So it doesn't really talk about kind of what's happening at the end. The same thing is going to happen over in the firehouse. We're going to want to bring people down. We're going to create a safe crossing there too.
And if the money's not here this time, it's nothing prevents us from coming in 3 or 4 years from now and putting a sidewalk in there.
Sidewalks are doable through a regular project, yeah. Katina.
How do you, I don't know if you don't do this, but a few years ago, we had a fiasco where we had a tractor trailer permanently parked in front of the road spot. Yes, and it's all permissible within the BTL. How do you avoid something like that happening? It was hard, there was a number of months.
And that's beyond us.
Yeah, that would be, it's an answer for traffic engineering. We can get an answer from traffic engineering for you on that. And let, they can tell, what they would do on something like that.
Would they rezone that street as parking or?
We'd have to speak to them.
Bill Trudeau.
That's a Bill Trudeau question. Yeah.
And just to clarify, some people had asked, she was asking about the tractor trailer being parked. Basically, I think the way to word it is, in this parking lane, somebody had left down Turner Roosevelt Park, a tractor trailer. And then it was there for some time, and it clearly would frustrate anybody. So, and she was asking about, how we would deal with that. That might be kind of an enforcement thing, and I'll leave it to Frank to kind of.
Yeah, we'll get them to do that. I just want to, go ahead, but I want to get to everybody, but.
The last week, the governor announced another $1 billion for the Wadsworth Health Lab. Has that been, or has this plan been coordinated at all with any of the plans for Aaron?
So we are,
Jenny, can you repeat the questions? It's hard to.
he was asking about the Wadsworth and the expansion of Wadsworth. So we've actually been in regular touch with Assemblymember Fahey, who is really the champion of that effort. And she's been strongly advocating. She totally shares the mayor's vision and my vision of wanting that integrated with the city. So that's something that she's really pushed for, to make sure that as part of the overall plan, there will be some sort of integration with this. From my perspective, I don't want to stop our forward movement to wait for the state. I appreciate that they're investing in it, but we've waited a long time for Brevator to happen. So from my perspective, I think it's something that we need to move forward. I think we can keep it in mind when it's along that side. So it's entirely possible that if our design does not include that sidewalk, it will likely come with Wadsworth. So I think there's different pieces that we can leave in mind on that side and really focus on what's best for our residents and our, the people that live here.
Okay. This gentleman over here has had his hand up since the beginning.
Actually, following Wadsworth. So a bunch of us who walk on Brevator go to the campus to walk. And right now, there's an inconsistency between crosswalks and Brevator. And at the campus, they've done a nice job with the crosswalks. You no longer take your life in your hands crossing the road, because there's nice distinctive crosswalks, big signs, there's a button you can push, there's flashing lights, and local officer car stops, but not on Brevator, the crosswalks are pretty hazardous. So what's your vision to get in from Brevator onto the campus, and how you going to handle the crosswalks?
So we're still looking through the details of the intersections. But to answer your question, so let's take this for example. I think this is probably the more complicated of the two. Maybe Bill will go argue with me on that one, but that's okay. For the purposes of the discussion, they've already made some improvements to that intersection, which I'm sure you're aware of. You can see the Jersey barriers are still out there. It seems like there's some things that are still happening. But that's generally the goal here, is to create a crosswalk condition. And there has been talks about whether the improvements to the light poles may include pedestrian signals in this area to allow that. So you would be able to go up, and the idea would be is that you use this and this intersection down here as the bridge across Brevator Street when it's complete. Does that help answer your question?
Well, it does answer it somewhat, but for example, having pedestrian signals with flashing lights would make it consistent with the campus, and I don't believe you've answered that statement.
I don't believe that is part of this yet. Okay. I don't think that's all stuff that traffic engineering will weigh in on. CDTA. Okay.
All those improvements in.
Okay. So there you go.
Well, obviously, I'm not sure whether or not they included that, but we can find out.
That's a good thing about this meeting. You brought it to our attention. We can put it on the list of things that we need to be looking at. Sir?
Thank you. I want to second or echo the comments of the gentleman at the back of the room that at this early stage of conceptualizing the redo of Brevator, it's a great time to think about undergrounding utilities. So to whatever extent that can be rolled into this, let's please do that and engage our utilities and communications providers on that. I have a question for the consultants. This may not be the right time to ask this, but this is something that's been weighing on my mind for a long time. I'm a homeowner at the intersection of Brevator and Melrose. Okay. And I remember vague trauma at the removal of the concrete maybe 8 or 10 years ago in the trench of 85. And so 85, looking at your map there, is probably 100 yards away from Brevator, roughly. And the technology that they used, the technique that they used at that time to remove the concrete was shaking the foundations of my home and everybody else along Brevator, and also down the side streets as well. Down.
Basically, they used the old concrete surface as a sub-base for the new roadway, correct?
Say what?
They used the old concrete roadway?
No.
They broke it up?
They broke it up, which I think is the intention on Brevator. I think the intention here is to break up the concrete, remove the concrete, and replace it with macadam, which makes sense. We're concerned about that process, that transition. That's a lot of concrete. And referring to that street, to Brevator, as a runway, you're absolutely right. It is a runway. It's thick concrete and rebar And we're concerned, we're looking for someone to allay our concerns about having this project take place like literally 20 feet from our homes. And you are talking about removing hundreds of tons of concrete and rebar, and how that's going to get broken up without having any impact on the structure of our homes is something that's of concern. Whether that's a question for now or later, that has to be dealt with.
For later, however, just keep in mind that if something ever happens to your home, the contractor is directly responsible for it. The way we're envisioning this is that we're going to be taking out piece by piece, not busting it up into sections.
They could do that?
We can talk to the contractor. That gets into what we call means and methods, how they do it. We can put restrictions on them. Like, if I was a contractor, I'd want to take all that concrete, pick it up, put it in a processing plant on site, and then use that for sub-base. But there's no way we would let that happen. The noise would be deafening.
And I think this is something, this is a major, I have to say the people that live on Brevator have been really, really such great advocates for this. But, I mean, and I remember there's these giant banging machines. And there's a lot of very valid concerns about the impacts of the homes because when you're shaking the house like that. So I think that it's something that we really have to make sure there's a lot of safeguards.
Talk to some contractors, find out what's the best way to do this to minimize the impact to the local community. It may cost a little more, but the alternative would be to saw cut everything and remove what's not under pavement because you're going to put green space in there. And the problem with that is any concrete that's left, you try to overlay with asphalt, and inherently asphalt and concrete don't do well together. What happens, water gets in there and just pops the asphalt off.
This doesn't have to be solved here tonight.
No.
But I'd like to echo Mark's concerns. My name's Amal. We own a house just the next block over on Brevator, Belvedere. And I think it's great to say that this is not now a conversation, but we would like to know when that conversation will be.
We may have heard some great projects.
Sure. And I think we've sort of been waiting to understand what the process will be and how we can, as homeowners, prepare. I know that I work from home too, so I've got some other questions about that. And we're not concerned about what decision is made. I think we just want to not just allay our concerns, but also just be part of the process.
And be prepared.
Be prepared. Exactly.
Anybody who lived on Madison Avenue when they were building the South Wall understands that. It's a real concern.
Whatever happens, this is going to be noisy. It's going to be dusty. It's going to be dirty. And it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But once it starts getting better, it's going to get very nice.
So maybe we can commit, to set up an additional conversation. I think we've been asking for that later on, for just for folks that are kind of most impacted by the thing. I have a different question about some of the data. I don't know if we're building up other people. You're talking about option, I think it was 2, the center median option, and it sounded like as you were explaining it, there were some ideas that it might slow down traffic. And I'm just thinking about other streets that have center medians, like Landing Boulevard, and what data that we have available that sort of shows that center median actually slows traffic. I'm just curious.
Okay. Again, another question for Bill Trudeau. I think we need to take we're taking notes, and I think we would need to talk. I don't know if data exists.
Well, so what I know of this is it narrows, narrowing the road. So a lot of calming down traffic is like a mind game because, you're, so I think the concept is narrowing the road and also being close to trees mentally makes people want to drive slower. But I would say between the two,
I can speak to that. Basically, it's a common street traffic process. It's yes, we can talk about individual streets where people feel like they're moving faster. But as a whole, right, if we look at just a streetscape as a whole, things like street trees, there's lots of things. speed bumps, it can get really crazy, but a lot of those really aren't as effective, is narrowing the curves and giving people the perception that they don't have as much room as they think they have.
Sure, that's what I was wondering about the medians, like in particular. So maybe I might have misheard you. It's not necessarily the median, it's more of like a combined.
Well, you know, whether there's an option with a median and an option without, but I think in both scenarios, there would effectively both calm traffic, especially compared to, I mean, I could easily say with our data that we'll be able to calm traffic compared to what's out there today,
Yeah.
just because it's common practices, and they work throughout communities.
So go ahead, Mike, go ahead.
Calming?
Yeah, talk about, I mean,
Well,
you're,
you're talking about traffic calming strategies, and it's well known, pretty well known now, it's been for years. The things like narrowing the lanes, including median, planting trees, all slow down traffic. You just have, it's narrower so people don't get the same view and they slow down, versus the wide pavement that we have now. The same thing's going on in Washington Avenue now, you know, near Seward. Because it's wide, it's very difficult to slow traffic down, even though you have a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Yeah.
You have all this pavement, so people feel like they can go faster, and they do.
I think
So
both of the options
this
accomplish the
strategy
same
will slow
thing. I
down
think one is
calm traffic.
okay, in the back there.
So this option here, where you have the median and the travel, whatever, multi-use lane on the right side of the residence, is there a sidewalk in that option, or are you expecting all of that pedestrian and travel to go into the left side of parking with the traffic that's going by? Does that make sense? Is there a
Yes, I understand your question, I believe. So I'm just going to go to this different image. The idea is that the multi-use trail would accommodate the majority of pedestrian and bicycle traffic.
Right, right.
So, and it would run along on the southern edge or the southeast edge, kind of depends on how you look at the map. And then we would have some sidewalk, likely on the north side, where it's needed to connect residences into this brand new network.
Okay.
Did I help answer that?
My concern, I live right on Brevator there, and I have children, and there are also other children who walk lots of buses and stuff, or to Rosemont Park. A lot of times we just go around to Belvedere and walk back. But my concern is if you put that median there and you're putting the pedestrians on the left side of where people are parking with the residencies, that you're putting those walkers in with the traffic. Because what's going on right now is a lot of times people are driving down, there's supposed to be 4 lanes. People don't know that. They're in the middle of the lanes or they're way over and they're speeding through. So oftentimes because they switch, there's like Sunday and Monday, there's parking on one side of the street versus the other. A lot of the times the parking is on the residential side where we are walking already in the road with our children, with the traffic that's going by. And my concern is if we don't have, I do like this, personally I like this option here where you have that gap between parking and residents of the road where you have kind of that like mediator of the traffic and where you're walking with your kids, you know, and I understand it's hard for the residents who are pulling out, but we are already aware of a lot of traffic going through, so I don't see that gap as being as much of an issue. I'm concerned about us walking still after these renovations in the street with traffic with that second option, I think it was.
Oh, so the second option has a sidewalk.
Okay,
Okay, so
sorry.
both of them-
Oh, sorry, I was concerned if there was a sidewalk in that option, so that
Yes.
we could walk up against the houses rather than in the cars. Sorry.
Okay.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Tracy Johnson. I'm the school principal here, but I also live in this neighborhood, so for me, it's double. And as you came in on the parking lot side, you can see that obviously there's a wastewater area that floods very quickly. My building floods multiple times a year on this corner here. What is being built into this design, because there are underground utilities on the corner here, as well as above ground. Can you just talk about what this corner, this intersection, that can be either really dangerous or extremely dangerous to pedestrians, what that would look like here on that western Brevator?
Yeah, so if I'm following, you're talking about
Yeah.
this building here.
That's where we are, yep.
And then you have a condition here, I know, I just having driven by, the parking lot kind of tends to kind of dip down in this location.
Yep.
And so when you're talking about flooding, is it within the roadway or is it within the parking lot?
It goes from the roadway into our parking lot. I have had the engineers out here with the storm drains, and I'm told that the area just can't for walkers or bike riders.
Right,
There's
so
nothing out there.
that intersection is in our scope to look at.
Okay.
And to improve connectivity, especially with the multi-use trail, there's going to be some.
So I guess that's my question, would that trail go right to Western Ave, making this corner a pedestrian-friendly corner?
Well, we're going to, the connectivity of pulling a typical streetscape pedestrian sidewalk bridge into a multi-use trail does take some forethought, so we're going to work with Bill Trudeau to make sure that that functions well from a circulation standpoint.
We have a lot of utilities on that corner.
Yeah, so the plan is to work around that and create a condition that works. Generally speaking, we want right away. This is the first aware that I'm really becoming aware that there's a drainage issue in that corner. Part of what we're going to try to do, part of our job, is to reduce runoff. So some of the improvements we're going to make to the street, and I think, talking with the city and the engineers, we'll find out more and we'll factor that into the final solution.
Thank you.
Fine. On the multi-use path, you were mentioning a very important point about maintenance before and things like snow plowing. Who would be taking responsibility for clearing that multi-use path off in the winter? Would that be the city?
It would be DGS, yes.
Okay, and the specific reason I'm wondering about that, when it comes to the multi-use versus bike lanes, is that in our experience, the Madison Avenue lanes really aren't cleared out in the winter. I mean, they've been there for 6 years, but after the first major snowfall last December, weather's still warm, and it's very rideable, but three days later, even with a couple of phone calls, they haven't been cleared off. And so the reality is that those bike lanes just don't seem to be navigable in the wintertime. And in that respect, it seems like you would have a better chance of having open travel with the multi-use option as long as the city was committed to maintaining it.
Well, the maintenance, like I said, the maintenance would be a part of it, but it is always something, it's never done right away. We got to clear, primary roads, secondary roads, tertiary roads, the park roads, then there's certain areas we will get to it, and we do get to it, but it's not necessarily the day after the storm. So, but where that is, maintenance, obviously, any plan that it comes along, you got to remember this is at the beginning phases of this. We're asking for, comments on these two options. But anything that we look at the end, any design that's finalized, maintenance is considered, and we do look at it, right? So that is a concern that we take into.
So earlier, you talked about the possibility of maybe merging the two options. So just a thought, is there enough cross-section there for both the center median and the multi-use path? There is not. So
No,
one or the other.
no, I don't mean to sound familiar. No, I'm thinking, processing back and reaching back. So when we look through the different scenarios where we could fit within the right-of-way, that was one that just wouldn't work. And what we want to do, and we also, what would happen is one of them would become so small it wouldn't function. So the median needs to be a certain width for it to work, the way we want it to. So I would say the answer is no. And even if we were to get it to work, the tricky thing with the multi-use trail is its interconnectivity into the greater network of sidewalks. So to just have a short section of trail, for example, maybe here or here, the infrastructure just to go that little way on a multi-use trail doesn't function very well. So these are sort of the grand ideas, but that is a great question. We actually, when we first looked at the plans right away, we thought it was a luxury, and then we went, oh man, we're going to get everything in here. But some of that stuff had to shake out. That's why we ended up in this.
Can I do that?
Yeah, just a quick question. Can you explain how, transit is going to interact with the street?
I'm sorry?
Transit's going to interact with the street.
For example, the buses.
Yeah, buses, exactly, yeah.
Right now, we're kind of in talks with how that is going to play into this. So we're a little too early on. It's not that we disregarded that, but how that gets in is going to be a nuance into a little bit greater detail.
Okay, because we see we see some of the improvements that they're trying to make right now, and just as far as routing is concerned, it'd be great to know how that works, along the street.
Like we move off the western bus turn only lane there to get into the state campus.
Yeah, we've got one option that probably demonstrates it a little better, where if you, this is very far away, and if your eyes are this good, I'm impressed, but we are talking about, like, see where this red is actually painted, part of the painting that goes on the ground to help direct CDA traffic and regular vehicles. So we are taking into considerations for that, but it's going to tighten up as we get more into the detail, when we kind of have a decision, know a little bit more about what the community is looking for in these two options.
Yeah, we also good to know, we also need some extra, accommodations from the streetscape that you guys have there.
I don't think there's any bus stops.
There is no trains in Brevator now.
Yeah.
There is the BRT that's playing. Right, the purple line coming up Western and going over here. But that's the only transit in the plan right now. There's no transit. There'll just be that one short section with the only buses.
Many years ago, a bus used to come up Western and go over Claremont Street, over to Westgate, and then go down Central and come back, take a loop. But that has been one for only 1 year.
I also just want to mention, I agree about the utilities too. It could be underground and great.
Okay.
I have just a quick question about the scoping of the project and in terms of both Western and Washington. It's sort of outside the main concept, which is great. But is there any thoughts about what can be done with redeveloping those intersections to control traffic speed, especially coming off the nominally 30 mile an hour, but actually like something like 65 average speed that comes down Washington into the city? Is there are already crosswalks there, but can there be any more treatment in particular to that intersection to really be like, hey, welcome to Albany. Now you're not, please behave by our rules in some way?
You're talking on Washington and on Western. Yeah, it's not within the scope of this project.
Part of the funding for this project, a large portion of it came from DEC, specifically for green infrastructure components. But on completion of this project, we'll be looking to seek out other grants, high amounts to do studies on Washington and Western specifically to tie those in. I mean, we are looking at the connectivity and what we can do on the corner there specifically, but for the rest of Washington or Western, that would be a separate phase after this.
Yeah. There have been some neighbors that have started talking about wanting to kind of do Western, just represent as much of Washington, but there has been some real neighborhood initiative to really address Western. And I know out Washington, that's been a major discussion point too. So there are some conversations happening, but a lot of it is scoped too because the initial neighborhood meetings on Western, it's all of Western, which is kind of almost too big to wrap your arms around. So I think that a lot of it is getting the ball rolling and then kind of having those conversations where you can actually get a manageable project. But I think everywhere in the city, and Frank Canisso represents like up further. I think it's a huge conversation in every part of the city, especially post-pandemic. Across the United States, we've found traffic speeds really increasing. So I think that it's just a major focus everywhere in the city. That makes it harder to do projects, but I can tell you it's definitely on a lot of people's lists. And this will drive it too, which is great.
Yeah. Okay, right here.
3 quick questions. Does anybody know the dimensions of this project? Like how long, is this like a half mile Brevator? How wide is that?
3,000 linear feet long.
How much?
3,000 linear feet long.
That's like, okay. And is there like a fixed budget for this? And the next question that ties into that is, what's a rough sense from the city of the timing of the building out of this project?
I'm going to cover that at the end when we're done with questions. That's one of the things I wanted to go over in its entirety.
Thanks.
So we have it.
3,000 feet, you said?
Yes. Roughly. Very close.
Thanks for being here. Thank you also for hosting. I live at the corner of Belvedere and Brevator, and in one of the townhomes. In front of the townhomes, there's a stretch of sidewalk that's required for the development. But there's nothing in between Rosemont and Brevator that connects those two streets. Yeah, in that whole section, it's a massive lead-wide roadway. Part of the concrete mess kind of dips into Belvedere. The reason I'm bringing this up is it feels like a shame to create this beautiful corridor, but then not connect it with the rest of the neighborhood and on these separate side streets. I'm not sure if there's sidewalks on Hawkins as well, but that's a little bit self-serving. I live right in front of it, so it's front of mind all the time. But you can't walk from Rosemont to this beautiful new corridor. You have to step into an ugly street. It's in really rough shape as well.
Unfortunately, it just comes down to a matter of money.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
It just seems like a shame to spend
Nothing that prevents
all the way
us
into that.
coming back in the future and put a median moving those streets.
Was there median? Because it's a beautiful median all the way down Belvedere, and then it just ends in Rosemont.
Again, well, it doesn't preclude it happening in the future, definitely. Tina?
How many subsequent meetings do we have before implementation, and there's no property and no trail to include in those meetings? Because those trails come off.
So, yeah, let me button up then. So if we're done with Q&A, let me talk about next steps, because I think that's a perfect. You have a question?
I do.
Okay.
Following up on a couple of earlier questions, like traffic engineering being responsible for enforcement on some of those issues, and utility questions, which sound like valid concerns to me. I'm no expert. And also I see in the plans for the firehouse that you'd be messing with the fire department's existing setup there. I would guess they probably have some opinions on that. But at what point in the project, as a project, will apart from us community people, or will other stakeholders, like anybody else who's touched by this, when do they get their input into the process and hopefully influence which plan is chosen?
You read my mind. That's when I said I'm going to talk about next steps. That's what I was going to talk about. I thought you had a question other than next steps. All right. So next steps. Yes, there'll be another, I'm sure we're going to have another meeting. This was the first of several. I think that, or at least of another that we'll have. The plan now is this information is going to go online, okay? Everything we talked about, this slide, photos, information will be online on the city's website on Thursday morning, okay? Come Thursday morning, there's a page on the city's site that says Brevator Improvement Project. You go there, all that information will be there. What will also be included is a survey that will give you a chance to give us information, tell us, answer questions, give us your input on the project, which one, option 1, option 2, answer some questions. There will also be a direct, specific question. If you have a separate question, one that is not an answer to in the survey, there will be a spot there where you can answer your question, hit submit. Somebody will get back to you within 24 to 48 hours with an answer via email, okay? There will also be a sign up for everybody. Now, Jenny was gracious enough to get the list. There will also be a sign up, okay, for anybody to give us your email address so that as we do updates and have future meetings, okay, that we will send out email lists so everybody will know exactly what it is and be able to keep on top of everything. As far as other stakeholders or other people that are involved in this, yes, Bill Trudeau will be a part of it. The fire department, it's going to affect the Brevator or anything we do. Obviously, they would have a say. We'll look at it. DGS has to look at it from an operational standpoint when we get to that. So yes, they will be a part of future meetings. I'm assuming water will be consulted when you're talking about, or not. I don't know, but we have to look into that and see if that was the case. There would be, so we would take all of the comments that came in, all the survey responses, any comments that came in on the side, and we would then, take that information to come up with the next step of the plan, and then after that, there would be probably another public meeting. And we would ask, again, we know that there's some questions about things that are traffic related. we know there's things that are utility related, we can inquire about those things. Did I miss anything? No? Okay.
I just want to say, we have the newsletter.
Oh, right, and there's a, yeah, beautiful. So there's a newsletter here that was put together with very basic information of what we've talked about so far, very basic. What there is on there is a QR code that will take you directly to that page if you're using a phone. If you're not using a phone, you can, and you're using a computer, again, it's albanyMLI.gov, and then you'll see there's a projects tab there on the homepage that will take you. And there's other projects on there that you might be interested in. There's information on New Scotland Avenue, there's information on Lark Street, there's information on every one of the contract, engineering contract projects for just streets. It's all on there. So there's a tracker on there that we created last year that's really great for every one of the projects, the street projects, 70 I think of them in all this year between in-house paving and the engineering contracts. It's all on there in an interactive map. You find the street on the map, you click it, it will tell you where it is in the process, what exactly is getting done, if there's trees being removed, if there's trees being planted, all of it's on there. So I ask everybody, please look at that because that'll answer probably a lot of your questions about these other projects too.
You can send an email to the neighborhood association and direct them to that survey. What is the deadline for that?
Deadline, you know what? I was going to add that on there. I don't have that.
I think it's 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
2 weeks from tonight?
From when it goes up.
From when it goes up. So it's going to be up on Thursday.
Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if we've signed Ginny's list, do we still have to sign up on the website?
No, Jim's going to give me that list, and I will make sure we input that into the system. And then I imagine there being, like I said, there's going to be updates, and that will include updates once construction starts. Now, that's the next question. When is all this going to happen? We're hoping to have the design again done by the fall, and for it to go out in the fall, out to bid for construction in the fall, late fall, and then have this be the project start first thing in the spring of 24. So just to give everybody an idea, and then from there, once we move forward again, that page will stay up on the website. So anything we can put on, anytime there's changes, anytime there's any information on the project will continue to be put there. And then if any newsletter, email types that go up will go out. If you're signed up, you will get them in your email box.
And I just want to go, so for the survey, will you be collecting where people live too in that survey? Just because I know...
If you want to get further updates, there's a place where you can put your name.
No. I mean in terms of feedback for the survey. So I know when I put that up there, I'm going to have people that live in like Gilderland filling this out, which is wonderful, but
Zip code.
I just want to make sure that we're tracking the appropriate data.
Jim, we're asking for zip code.
Okay.
So zip code will give you what you're,
But not necessarily.
I don't want to ask for address. I don't want to get into that.
Well, I guess.
Yeah. So,
yeah, like even a street.
yeah. Okay.
Along with the next steps, this is a very selfish question, because we're in school till June. What end of Brevator will the project start?
Oh, no idea.
We won't know that yet. We don't know that yet.
But so it's up to the contractors and input at that survey.
There might be input before it even goes out to bid. Again, next meeting, if it's something that you have, that's why these questions, this area on there, the emails, send some input through that way and say, if when you start this, you can, I don't know if it's possible,
But we will make the contractor very aware that school's in session.
Yeah.
And knowing what time you get the kids in and get the kids out, he's going to be aware, or he or she's going to be aware. And there will be restrictions, and also the site inspector will know too.
we can even, the person on site will probably more than likely have a meeting with you.
Okay.
We wouldn't have a problem doing that, making sure that you have their number, their name. You would have one of our project managers, you'd have their number, their name. So if anything comes up, you can talk to them directly. We won't leave you in the cold.
Are you going to have an MPNC scheme for these guys or for the contractor?
Say that again?
MPNC scheme.
We'll give them a suggested NPT scheme, and then the contractor will provide us with.
So they have to have.
What does that mean?
Maintenance and protection of traffic. Maintenance and protection of traffic. It's lane closures. You've all driven down through a construction site where someone's holding the flag,
question, but the questions that we asked today, I know that you'll post the video, but will there be like a record of those questions? Do we have to re-input those questions into the survey?
Well, I want everybody here to take the survey. The survey, that's why we put it together like that, so you can be able to look at both. Because some of the questions you asked were general questions, and the stuff that you're putting in, if you have specifics, worries, concerns, like we know utilities need to be looked at, we know the parking, and there's things that we know and need to talk about. But if there's something specific, send an email. It's an online form. Fill the form out with your specific question. If it's not, yes.
You're not satisfied with the answers you got tonight.
Right.
Well, no, I just heard that there were going to be some specific follow-ups to questions today. So I'm curious, like, who will be, if somebody took notes, it sounded like.
Yeah, I think more, we took notes, but I think part of it's going to be taking that into account. I'm asking that, yes, to be sure that we got your question, and then it's part of it. Please go online and ask that question. It's not asking a question, it's asking us to consider something in the plan. Okay? What else? Anything else? Okay, so again, please go on the website. There's going to be, everything's going to be on there, and we're